now the heart of Nigeria will fall once again to the APC party, and crowds of supporters will stake their presence here in the capital, Abuja, having, at least for now, toppled the opposition. Muhammadu Buhari steps down as president next month following 2 terms in office. He'll hand power over to Bola Tinubu, who won disputed presidential elections in February. President Buhari's critics say that after 8 years in office, he leaves Nigerians worse off than when he came to power in 2015. One of those he's left disappointed is the popular civil society activist, author, playwright and former Senator Sheu Sanni. In a series of tweets, Senator Sanni has been withering in his criticism, suggesting that Mr. Buhari has roundly mishandled Nigeria's security challenges and has left Nigerians less secure, poorer and more in debt. Senator Sanni has not been impressed either by the APC team of spokespersons representing the incoming President Bola Tinubu, and has expressed shock at what he calls the toxic comments from some of them aimed at political opponents and those who disagree with them. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from Kaduna by the civil society activist, author, playwright and former Senator Sheu Sanni. Senator Sanni, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We appreciate the time very much. And let me start by asking you about one of your latest tweets, which I think came out probably yesterday or so, in which you were talking about the spending, the last-minute spending by the administration as their sort of last days ebb away. I mean, can you kind of tell us what you were referring to and your sense of the kind of spending that's going on there?
Thank you for having me in your program. Well, President Muhammadu Buhari has spent 8 years in office, and there are 2 paths to which you can use to measure his achievements. One is putting his own track record in comparison with the one he inherited, and also tallying what he promised and what he delivered. These are 2 indices. Now, when I tweeted, my tweet is to reflect what is going on presently. For a government that has very few days to live, a lot of things seems to be happening when they should be wrapping up and then working towards a handover to a president-elect who is from their party, but they seems to be doing things which they ought to have done many years or many months ago. At this very hour, you see them awarding contracts in billions of naira, and then they are also sourcing for loans from outside of the country. They are issuing out appointments and employing people and engaging in all sorts of things, which to me, I see it as a trap being set for the president-elect, which is Tinubu, as it is clear. All these last-minute engagements by the president does not seem to go in good path, because spokesperson after spokesperson, they keep telling us that we will miss Buhari, we will miss this government, we will wish that he is in power, as if they are handing power to Labour Party or handing over power to PDP. And when you say we are going to miss the president, when you say we are going to miss this administration, you are more or less predicting doom or telling us what we don't know. So I am saying this last-minute engagement and involvement and activities of this government does not seem to be one that can be said to be with good intentions.
Well, in that context then, when he steps down next week after 8 years in office, I mean, what sort of country do you think President Buhari will be leaving behind for Nigerians?
Well, I must say I pity the incoming president as far as what he is going to inherit as a country. And I know very well that there is going to be a tough time for Nigerians and also for this administration, for the incoming administration. If President Muhammadu Buhari has done what he ought to do years ago, it could have been a smooth sailing for the next president. The next president is inheriting a divided country along sectional, ethnic, and regional line. The next president is inheriting over 77 trillion naira domestic and foreign debt. The next president is inheriting 133 million poor Nigerians. The next president is inheriting uncompleted projects and abandoned promises by this administration. The next president is inheriting a serious security problem that has remained unsolved by this administration. According to recent statistic, which was official, about 63,000 Nigerians were killed in the last 8 years of this administration. Kidnapping is still gone. Terrorists from Boko Haram to ISIS are still operating. So these are the challenges the next president is going to inherit. And meanwhile, remember, is it the IMF World Bank said in the next few months, about 96% of our revenue will be used to service debt. Now, this is what the incoming president-elect is going to face. So this is the kind of country President Buhari is leaving behind. And to me, I think the next president is not inheriting a plane that's on a tarmac, but he is taking over the seat of a pilot while the plane is on turbulence, it's on storm. So I know that things are not going to be easy, because some of the hardest decisions this government ought to have taken, they refused to do it at the last minute. They couldn't remove the oil subsidy, which they are leaving it for the next administration. They couldn't conduct the census, they are leaving it for the next administration, and so many things. And you see them giving out contracts, you see them giving out employment letters, you see them sourcing for more loans. When we move from sourcing for $10, $20 billion loan, we have gone to $800 million loan, which they have even reached a point that as if the country will not function if we don't borrow. So I think what I have seen ahead is a challenge, a tough challenge for Nigerians. And from what I have read from the president-elect, he has not been enthusiastic in making the kind of false promises that was done in the past, like making $1 to £1 or building refineries every 6 months. And I believe that by the time Buhari leaves power, there will be a lot of revelation as regards to what has actually happened in the last 8 years with this administration. And the best way to do it is for the incoming administration to come out openly and tell Nigerians the truth, what they have actually inherited. But if you cover them, if you try to protect this administration on the ground that you are from the same party, the roof is going to fall on the head of whoever is going to take over power in Nigeria after May 29. So that is my view. They should tell Nigerians the truth of what they have inherited, and if there is a need to immediately set up a committee or panel to probe this administration, all the laws that have been sourced and the projects they have been used for, and how the ministries, department of agencies of this government have been run for the last 8 years, this incoming administration must probe this administration if they are going to have the benefit of doubt and the leverage for them to be able to operate. But if you take over power and say everything is fine and good, then you should know it that you are going to bear the consequences of what will happen after May 29.
Well, I think you're right about the issue of debt, to the extent that when Mr. Buhari took over, debt was around $60 billion, and as he prepares to leave, it's now over $150 billion. But their argument, and I'm not a spokesman for them, but it is only fair to put forward their argument, is that far from this being a borrowing spree, as it's being made out, that first of all, it is within acceptable limits, but also that there have been a lot of gains. A lot of that money has been spent on improving the supply of military hardware to the army, tackling Boko Haram. There's been improvements to the road and rail networks. There's a new port in Lagos, the completion of the Niger Bridge in the southeast, the commissioning today of Africa's biggest refinery, etc. I mean, surely those are a credit to President Buhari.
Well, what I want us to take notice about this administration is that apart from President Muhammadu Buhari, the next person that speaks on the economy is simply the governor of Central Bank. It's like he is the prime minister of this administration, and everything about the economy centers around him. A government is supposed to have an economic team, an economic council, in which informed economic decisions are made by experts, by technocrats, by people who know what the economy is all about. But in this administration, who is the star in the economy? None. It's all about the CBN involved in infrastructure, the CBN involved in transport, the CBN involved in construction of bridges, the CBN involved in agriculture. So it's all about, it begins and ends with CBN and the governor of Central Bank. And that is why we're here. Now, it is not simply about you have constructed a second Niger bridge, or you have built roads from Kaduna to Abuja or to Kano or Lagos Ibadan. If those funds, if those infrastructures were executed with public funds and with borrowed money, people need to know how much was borrowed and how much of that money that was borrowed was used for such projects. It's very important. You can't pile up such a debt. Within the last 3 years, the current National Assembly has approved over $30 billion for foreign loan. So is it because we have built bridges and construct roads, so I should not, as a Nigerian, demand to know how much was used? Meanwhile, this money has to be paid. If we are going to pay this money, we need to know the cost of those projects that was done. And that is the first assignment of this administration. And again, you have seen things going on in speed. Approval for spectrum, Ministry of Communication, concession of airports, concession of ports, concessioning of a stadium, concession upon concession. It's all happening within the last few days and few weeks. And mind you, when you are concessioning, you are sitting down with those people from the other side. You are writing agreements, signing papers, legal papers, and then these are the kind of things that happened in the past. We wake up and then we hear that Nigeria has been taken to court in London or in Paris, and we have lost the case, and our account will be garnished with in billions of naira, dollars or pounds or euro. So to me, it's not about you have built roads. You built road with public funds, and you built road with borrowed money from China or Islamic Development Bank of Saudi Arabia or IMF or World Bank or Afrexim Bank. You build roads with money you have borrowed. So we need to know how much of that borrowed money was used for such project. So if you borrow and then you construct a bridge, so what am I going to do? I should thank you for borrowing, or thank you for building bridges, or thank you for borrowing and building bridges, or simply I should thank you for building bridges while I take the brunt of payment of such debt. So that is how a government, you have to answer questions. And one thing which they don't want us to know, they don't want to answer, is the money that was spent on projects. For example, now, in the last 7 to 8 years, over $20 billion was budgeted for defense. But what has it translated to in terms of security in the country? Boko Haram and other terrorist groups are still operating in the northeastern part of Nigeria. In Kaduna here, as we are conducting this interview, you can't move out of outskirts of Kaduna, 1 kilometer outskirts of Kaduna, for the next 1 hour without getting into the hands of bandits. Even if there is no bandits, you have fear that you will fall into the hands of bandits. What has such money, humongous amount of money that has been budgeted to defense and security, what has it been used for? With all respect, our military have been engaging the terrorists, have been fighting, and I must salute those who have, the families of those whose loved ones have sacrificed their lives for this country. But if you look at the money that was allocated for defense in this country, then you look at the situation which you are in now, then you ask yourself a question. Nigeria's defense budget is 10 to 20 times more than that of Niger, more than that of Cameroon, more than that of Benin Republic. But those nations are more secure than we are. What have we seen? We have seen the army building event centers, the army building hotels, the army building universities, the army building all those things that have nothing to do with security in the country. And the same thing with other paramilitary forces, they're also engaged in building.
Right. I think you certainly have...
So as far as I'm concerned, questions need to be asked.
I think you're very correct, Senator Sanni, that accountability must be the watchword of any country that wants to make progress. We're fast running out of time, so I'm trying to get to a number of things before we have to go. We've got about 5 minutes or so. In the context of the things that you have said, how can Bola Tinubu reinvigorate this country and inspire many people who have lost faith? People like yourself, arguably, who've lost faith in this country's leadership and its institutions. Briefly.
Well, when you are being given a leadership responsibility like this, it's an opportunity for you to impact on the lives of people who have voted for you and those who have not voted for you. The first task of the president-elect is see how you can unite this country with due respect to what has happened after this 2023 election. The next thing is to have a team that will really work for Nigeria. This idea of outgoing governors, sense of entitlement that they have worked hard for him to be president of this country, and as such they must be appointed into office. He will end up like the Buhari administration, keeping them in power as ministers for 8 years and achieving nothing. The next thing is he must prioritize what he needs to do, not 20 points agenda or 30 points agenda. We have problems with security, he has to address it. We have problems with the economy, he has to address it. We have problems with the educational sector and infrastructure. These are key issues that he has to put on front and then tackle them. And most importantly, electoral reform. Knowing what has actually happened with the 2023 elections. I believe things will get better if we do that. And in every area you get expert. You can't appoint an outgoing governor, a minister, simply because he has claimed to have helped you to win election. If he has done that for the service of the country, then they should be expected to be appointed into any office. If they have done that because they are claiming that they supported him for nationalistic, for patriotic reasons, then there should be no expectation of any appointment. And I know it very well, especially the northern governors. Their own support for him is based on what appointment they are going to get. And if they are not going to get it, they will go back to whip up ethnic sentiment against him. That's a fact matter. So Bola Tinubu must pick a team that will really work for Nigeria. Not politicians who are simply going to be there for the sake of being appointed into office. I think this is what is very important.
Yes, I would agree, and I'm sure a lot of people would. And in the context of that, of the appointments that you're talking about, can I ask you about the leading spokespersons for Bola Tinubu and the APC, the likes of Fani Kayode, Festus Keyamo, etc., that you've tweeted about, who you and many others have accused of saying the most provocative and extraordinary things. I mean, in the context of what you just told us about appointments, what does that tell you that the president-elect has had to rely on what some would consider to be extremely volatile personalities, it would seem?
Well, you see, I know the mentality of those persons because we come from the same background as activists. We are naturally combative. And as activists, when you find yourself in the position of authority, you find it difficult to adjust to the diplomacy of being in government. But what I just want them to understand is that they are no more in their position, and that it is when they are on the throne, it's natural that whoever takes over the position of leadership, he must be questioned, he must be criticized, and he must be held accountable. So it is the duty of those who are his spin doctors and spokesperson to rather use the strategy of providing facts and details and truth as far as issues are concerned, rather than replying insult and attacks with attacks. I think this is what is most important. But I can understand their situation, but it is not good for now. With regards to all that has happened, what we need is someone who will speak the language that will comfort the heart of people,
right,
and that will calm nerves, and this is what is needed at this time. Yes.
Okay, just briefly, because we've got to go in a minute, and it's been brilliant talking with you as always. I'm sure you've been watching the National Assembly where you served as a senator. How important a factor is it that the opposition have collectively retained control of the House of Representatives and are just 10 senators shy of controlling the Senate as well? I mean, how much is that potentially a recipe for stalemate, or that's not likely to happen?
Well, from my own understanding, what is happening in the Senate, there are three major contenders. You have Akpabio, Yari, and then Uju Uzakalu. Now, they are all from the same party. It is incumbent on the president-elect and his party to sit down and get their acts together, because once they go into an election on the floor with a divided house, certainly the ruling party favored candidate will lose. He will either lose to an opposition candidate, or a ruling party member favored candidate will lose. He will either lose to an opposition candidate or a ruling party member who is rebellious from the decision of the party. As for the House of Representatives is inhabited by younger people who are more rebellious than senators. And the fact of the matter is that it is difficult. It is easier to get the understanding of senators than that of the members of House of Reps. Looking at the large numbers and also their age and their background, and many of them their experiences. So it is in the interest of the president-elect and the ruling party to sit down and get the feelings, the views, the opinion, and consult more, and ensure that whoever you are bringing forward will get popular support of others, and also reach out to the opposition is very important. If they make the tragic mistake of going into the National Assembly for the election of principal officers, the Speaker and House of Reps, with a divided House, it will come out with a result which they will be sorry for it. This is my own little knowledge of what is likely going to happen.
And as always, we cherish that knowledge. It's always very illuminating talking with you. I want to thank you very much indeed, Senator Sheu Sanni, who is talking to me there from